Greetings, my name is Dennis DeMuth. Our topic today is how to become an effective taskmaster. Generally, a taskmaster is one who imposes a harsh workload on someone. However, in our case, a taskmaster is one who has mastered the techniques required to train students to complete various tasks. The taskmaster is not a fictional supervillain who appears in American comic books published by the Marvel Comics, but a real live educator. Over the past 49 years in role as teacher, psychologist, principal, superintendent, and college professor, I've been in hundreds of classrooms all around the world. I have observed the importance of being an effective taskmaster, one who can guide and direct students to accomplish what is being taught. In each classroom, from the time the class starts until the end, students are called upon to complete a number of tasks, all of which are important in the educational process. By following the recommendations made in these three presentations, you will learn how to be an effective and efficient taskmaster, not harsh, but loving and caring. Visit our website to download a presentation handout and a PDF copy of this presentation. Can you think of a time in teaching where you had difficulty getting your students to respond correctly to what you were teaching? Many times the noise level of an unruly classroom can be as high as 60 to 75 decibels. Try getting attention in this environment. It just isn't going to happen unless you take drastic measures such as cracking a whip. Those who have been in teaching for a number of years know the importance of having an orderly classroom where students pay attention. It is estimated that if a teacher has to take 5 minutes out of every subject to gain the attention of the students, by the end of the school year, there will have been nearly 2 weeks of school lost to getting attention. And this is just in one class. Think of all the time wasted in schools with dozens of classrooms where attention is a challenge. Teachers have used all kinds of actions to get attention. Some blow a whistle. Others slap a ruler on the desk. Some snap their fingers while others just yell, "Quiet!" Others have been very innovative, like one first grade teacher who had trained her children to pay attention by saying out loud, "Alligator, alligator." The students reply, "Chomp, chomp," as they slap their hands like an alligator mouth. My daughter teaches computer science. She uses the cue, "Mouse, mouse," to which her students raise their hand in the air, and as they move their pointer finger up and down, they respond, "Click, click." Another teacher said that she says, "1, 2, 3, eyes on me." Another one uses a doorbell that she pushes when she needs the student's attention. One teacher simply says, "Ears," to which the students simply reply in unison, "Open, sir." There is nothing more frustrating than not getting everyone's attention when it is time to teach a task. The sooner you can train your students to pay attention, the more effective you will be as a taskmaster, and the easier your teaching will be. Even in those classrooms where good routines have been established, teachers still have to put forth a lot of effort to get student attention and then to maintain it. How many of you have had situations where you thought you had everyone's attention, but the response you got back from a simple question asked indicated that someone wasn't paying attention? For example, in this illustration, the teacher asks Johnny, "Tell me these letters." Johnny responds, "RVS." The teacher replies, "Johnny, you need to pay closer attention during phonics class." Paying attention during the teaching of a task is extremely important if Johnny is to learn his phonics or any other material being taught. Being an effective taskmaster requires you to get and then to maintain attention. In the presentation that follows, I will share some practical suggestions that will enable you to become an effective taskmaster. Being an effective taskmaster requires you to focus on 3 aspects of teaching a task. We know these as SRC. S, the teacher presents a stimulus or a signal such as, see this? This is the number 4. What is this number? Next we have the R, which is the student responds. It is the number 4. Next is C. The teacher presents a consequence. Yes, you are right. It is the number 4. The effective use of consequences can be a very, very powerful tool for teachers if they are used correctly. Teachers can reinforce the correct response by using positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is used to improve or to increase a child's performance on a certain activity. Therefore, in the early stages of teaching, it is important to arrange for immediate reward after each correct performance. Let us take a closer look at the conditions for reinforcement. Being an effective taskmaster requires you to know when to reinforce. Since reinforcement is a powerful technique, we need to point out some key concepts regarding reinforcement. First of all, reinforce immediately. In teaching a new task, reinforce immediately rather than permitting a delay between the response and the reinforcement. Once the behavior is learned, then rewards can be scheduled to develop persistence. If you are training your students to raise their hand and waiting to be called on before responding, as soon as Peter raises his hand, reinforce him. Secondly, reinforce early in learning. You reinforce every single response. Later, reinforce some of the responses. When you say eyes to the front, initially you want to reinforce every student whose eyes are towards the front. I like the way Peter is looking at me, Helen, Sam, Susie, and so forth. Later, reinforce some of the responses. Number 3, reinforce improvement. Simply catch them doing good and then catch them doing better. Next, do not reinforce wrong behavior. Let's say a teacher tells the class to turn to page 65. She may give a general reinforcer such as, good job turning to page 65. However, not everyone may be turning to page 65. For example, she sees that Johnny isn't even getting his book out. She repeats herself, class, turn to page 65. In a few seconds, everyone is on the correct page except Johnny. The teacher adds, come on, Johnny, turn to page 65. So Johnny starts to thumb through his book. Knowing that everyone needs to be on page 65 before she starts, and Johnny is not, the teacher finally goes over and finds the page for Johnny. So what has happened? Johnny has successfully trained his teacher to nag at him. 3 specific mistakes were made. First, the teacher gave attention to dawdling. Second, no attention was given to Johnny for even getting his book out, or any of the other students. And thirdly, the teacher ended up helping Johnny find the page. So do not reinforce wrong behavior. Number 5, avoid using predictable reinforcement. You might have a case where a student begins to look into the air until the teacher comes near the child. As the teacher gets nearer, the student begins to work. So what is happening? The actions is really training and teaching the student to listen when the teacher is near. So you want to avoid using predictable reinforcement. In this case, closeness may be the reinforcer of not doing what is asked. Number 6, use unpredictable intermittent reinforcement. One way that you might want to do this is to place a card on the student's desk. And then you set a timer for a random time. When the timer goes off, the teacher looks over and gives points for all who are on task. Points can then be traded at the end of the class for a reinforcer. Number 7, vary reinforcers to avoid the old hat effect. The constant use of the same reward tends to reduce its value. So use new dynamic words such as cool, awesome, out of sight, terrific, beautiful, fabulous, splendid, rather than the word that I hear so often, all right, good job. Be creative. If you have a difficult time remembering different words or phrases to use, simply write them on your lesson plans or on note cards and check them off as you use them. In addition to positive consequences, being an effective taskmaster requires you to know when to use negative consequences. A negative consequence is a means by which the teacher can decrease the probability that a behavior will occur in the future. Negative consequences are usually those events that the student considers to be unpleasant. For example, the loss of a privilege, or not being allowed to participate in an activity, or being placed in timeout. Anything that is considered to be unpleasant is a negative consequence. Teachers use negative consequences to extinguish the wrong response. For example, you might say, "No, that is not the right answer." Or, "Johnny, this is the third time I have told you to stop pulling Susie's hair. Because you have not stopped, you will not be able to participate in the game." What do you think is the most common error made by teachers in disciplining students? Did you say inappropriate anger? When this emotional response takes place, it shows that the teacher is viewing the student's behavior personally. The use of anger by teachers is then reinforced when students stop the inappropriate behavior. But who is being reinforced? Not the student, but the teacher. Unfortunately, because of being reinforced themselves, teachers will tend to use anger more often. Teachers think that anger works, but they fail to realize that anger only creates a root of bitterness within the student and causes the student to avoid the teacher. Negative consequences need to be administered calmly and consistently and should be the known logical consequence for inappropriate behavior. The second most common mistake is overcorrection. Be careful that the punishment that you give out fits the crime, or you will get a negative response from the student. There are two primary types of overcorrection. One is restitutional overcorrection, and the other one is positive practice. Restitutional overcorrection takes place when the student goes beyond just correcting the misbehavior. For example, if Susie throws trash on the floor next to her desk, she is asked not only to pick up the trash around her desk, but all the other trash on the floor. A second type of overcorrection is called positive practice. This takes place when Susie is asked to repeatedly practice the correct behavior. For example, let's say she throws a crumpled up piece of paper at the trash container, missing the container. She's asked to go over and pick up the paper and to place it in the trash container, and she does this 20 times. Positive practice. There is a caution in using negative consequences that you need to know about. These consequences have the tendency to produce negative responses, maybe not overtly and openly, but behind your back. In part 1, you found that being an effective taskmaster requires you to focus on 3 aspects of teaching a task, SRC: teacher signal, student response, and consequences. Furthermore, being an effective taskmaster requires you to know when to reinforce, when to use negative consequences, and to know the pitfalls of using overcorrection. In part 2 of this session, we will break down the teaching task into 4 major components. Knowing these 4 components will help in the process of becoming an effective taskmaster. This ends part 1. Proceed to part 2.